The early morning sun lit up the countryside as the farmer, Mateo, prepared for his trip to the city. Mateo was a simple man clad in worn jeans, sturdy boots, and a faded flannel shirt. A wide-brimmed straw hat shielded his weathered face from the sun, and his hands bore the calluses of decades of hard work. His modest attire was a reflection of his lifestyle, humble but full of pride in his accomplishments. Mateo had saved for years, tirelessly working his fields, harvesting crops, and managing livestock. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a visionary. Today, he was headed to the bustling city airport to fulfill a dream that had seemed impossible to everyone but him, buying his own private jet. It wasn't a frivolous purchase. It was an investment in his growing agricultural business. A jet would allow him to expand his reach, meeting international clients and delivering goods faster than ever before. As Mateo approached the airport's grand entrance, he felt a mix of excitement and unease. The sleek modern architecture and the polished floors were a far cry from the dirt paths and wooden fences he was used to. He stood out in the crowd not because of his determination, but because of his simple clothes. As he stepped inside, the glances began. The showroom for private jets was filled with elegantly dressed individuals. Suits, silk dresses, and designer shoes surrounded Mateo. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the murmur of conversations laced with pretension. He walked up to the counter where a sharply dressed salesperson named Richard stood. Richard took one look at Mateo and immediately raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" Richard asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Yes, I'm here to see the jets," Mateo replied, his voice steady. Richard hesitated, then smirked. "The jets? Are you sure you're in the right place?" Mateo nodded. "I'm sure." With a dismissive wave, Richard led Mateo toward the showroom, his reluctance evident. "These jets aren't cheap, you know," he said, his words laced with condescension. "Maybe you'd like to see our economy class tours instead." Mateo ignored the jab and focused on the sleek aircraft in front of him. He ran his fingers along the smooth surface of one jet, imagining the possibilities it could bring. But as he admired the craftsmanship, Richard's impatience grew. "If you're not serious about buying, I have other clients to attend to." Mateo turned to face him, his calm demeanor unwavering. "I am serious. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." Richard scoffed. "Sure you are, but let's be honest. You don't look like someone who can afford this." Other customers nearby began to take notice. Whispers spread, accompanied by smirks and judgmental glances. Mateo could hear snippets of their conversations. Does he think he's fooling anyone? He probably just wants a photo. Mateo felt the weight of their stares but refused to let their opinions deter him. This wasn't about them, it was about his dream. As he continued to examine the jet, a familiar voice called out from behind him. "Mateo, is that you?" Mateo turned to see Carlos, an old friend from his village. Carlos was dressed casually, his belly slightly rounded and his striped shirt untucked. The sight of a friendly face was a welcome relief. "Carlos," Mateo exclaimed, shaking his hand. "What brings you here?" "I could ask you the same," Carlos replied with a chuckle. "Are you here to buy a plane?" Mateo hesitated before nodding. "I am, but I don't exactly fit in here." Carlos laughed, clapping Mateo on the shoulder. "Don't worry about these people. They're all show. What matters is what you can do, not how you look." Their conversation eased Mateo's tension, but the stares and whispers persisted. A group of men nearby began snapping pictures of him, their laughter echoing in the showroom. "Look at this guy," one of them sneered. "Does he even know how much these cost?" Mateo felt his cheeks flush, not with embarrassment but with anger. He clenched his fists, determined not to let their mockery win. As he turned to leave with Carlos, a loud voice stopped him. "Hey, farmer," one of the men shouted. "You think anyone's going to take you seriously in those clothes? Go back to your farm where you belong." The room fell silent. All eyes were on Mateo. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding, and turned to face the man who had insulted him. "I didn't come here to impress anyone," Mateo said, his voice firm. "I came here to buy a jet." The room erupted in laughter, but Mateo stood his ground. Richard smirked, crossing his arms. "And how exactly do you plan to do that? With your tractor, huh?" Mateo reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. He held it up for everyone to see. The laughter stopped as the amount registered in their minds. It was enough to buy the jet outright. The color drained from Richard's face. I didn't realize... No, you didn't, Mateo interrupted. You judge me by my appearance, not by my capabilities. But let me tell you something. This check represents years of hard work, determination, and sacrifice. And I'm not going to let anyone belittle me for it. The room was silent as Mateo turned to Carlos. Let's go, he said. I'll find someone who actually wants to sell me a jet. As they walked out, Mateo's phone buzzed. It was a call from his son, Santiago, a successful lawyer. Mateo recounted the events to him, his voice tinged with frustration. Santiago listened intently. Don't worry, Dad, Santiago said. I'm on my way. No one gets away with treating you like this. As Mateo and Carlos exited the showroom, the bustling noise of the airport surrounded them. Mateo's mind was racing, the weight of the confrontation still fresh. Carlos, sensing his friend's unease, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Mateo, don't let them get to you, Carlos said firmly. You're better than their judgment. They don't know what it takes to build a legacy like yours. Mateo nodded silently, his jaw set in determination. He glanced at his phone, checking the time. Santiago was on his way, and Mateo trusted his son to handle the situation with precision. But deep down, Mateo felt there was still something he needed to do. Something that would show these people exactly who he was. Carlos, Mateo began, his voice calm but resolute. I'm not leaving this airport without what I came here for. Those people in there might think they've won, but they haven't. Carlos grinned. Now that's the Mateo I know. What's the plan? Before Mateo could respond, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb outside the airport. Santiago stepped out, exuding confidence. His tailored navy moon suit and polished shoes contrasted sharply with his father's modest attire, yet they shared the same unyielding determination in their eyes. Santiago approached his father, his briefcase in hand, and gave him a firm handshake. Dad, Santiago said, his voice steady, I've got this. Let's show them what the Rivera family is made of. Mateo smiled, feeling a surge of pride. I'm glad you're here, son. Without hesitation, the three men made their way back into the airport, heading straight for the jet showroom. Santiago's presence was commanding, and the room seemed to quiet as they entered. Richard, the salesperson, froze when he saw them. Mr. Rivera? Richard stammered, his tone now overly polite. I didn't expect you to return so soon. Santiago stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Let's cut to the chase, he said coolly. I understand there's been an issue with how my father was treated. Care to explain? Richard opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The group of onlookers who had mocked Mateo earlier shifted uncomfortably, their confidence fading under Santiago's sharp gaze. I see, Santiago continued, his tone sharp. It seems you judged my father based on his appearance. That's a mistake you won't make again. Mateo stepped forward, standing tall beside his son. I may not wear a suit, he said, his voice firm, but I've worked harder than most of the people in this room. I've built my life from the ground up, and I won't let anyone diminish. The silence in the room was deafening. Mateo's words carried weight, and even the most judgmental onlookers couldn't deny the truth in them. Santiago, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, decided to take things a step further. We'll be speaking with your manager, Santiago said to Richard, his tone leaving no room for argument. It's clear that this establishment has some serious flaws in how it treats its customers. Before Richard could respond, another man approached. He was older, with salt and pepper hair and a sharp suit that spoke of authority. He extended his hand to Mateo. Mr. Rivera, the man said warmly. My name is Mr. Bennett, and I'm the regional director here. I want to personally apologize for the treatment you've received today. It's unacceptable, and I assure you, we will address it immediately. Mateo hesitated before shaking the man's hand. I appreciate that, Mr. Bennett, he said, but words alone won't fix this. Agreed, Bennett replied. Allow me to personally assist you in selecting the right jet for your needs. No one should have to go through what you experienced. The gesture was genuine, and Mateo could see the sincerity in Bennett's eyes. He nodded, and together they began discussing the various options available. Meanwhile, Santiago stayed close, ensuring that the process was handled with the utmost respect. As they moved through the showroom, Richard and the other onlookers watched from a distance, their earlier smugness replaced with quiet regret. Carlos, ever the supportive friend, leaned in close to Mateo. "You're handling this like a true professional," Carlos said with a grin. "They won't forget this day anytime soon." Mateo smiled but remained focused. He was here for a purpose, and he wouldn't let anything distract him from achieving it. After an hour of discussions, Mateo finalized his choice: a sleek, mid-sized jet with all the features he needed to expand his business. Mr. Bennett personally oversaw the transaction, ensuring that everything was handled smoothly. As Mateo signed the final paperwork, he felt a sense of triumph. This wasn't just a purchase, it was a statement, a reminder that success wasn't about appearances, but about determination, resilience, and hard work. Before leaving the showroom, Mateo turned to the crowd that had gathered. His voice was steady, but his words carried the weight of his journey. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "Never underestimate someone based on how they look. You don't know their story, their struggles, or their dreams. Respect costs nothing, but means everything." With that, Mateo, Santiago, and Carlos walked out of the showroom, their heads held high. The jet Mateo had purchased would soon be delivered, but the victory wasn't just about the plane. It was about standing up for himself and proving that his worth was far greater than anyone's judgment. As they stepped outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the city. Mateo turned to Santiago and Carlos, his smile wide and genuine. "Thank you," he said, "for standing by me." Santiago placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "Always, Dad. You taught me what it means to fight for what's right." Carlos chimed in with a laugh. "And don't forget, you owe me a ride in that jet." Mateo chuckled, the tension of the day finally easing. "You've got it, Carlos. First stop, anywhere we want." The three men shared a laugh as they walked toward the parking lot, the weight of the day replaced with a sense of accomplishment. Mateo's journey wasn't over, but this was a victory he would cherish forever. As they drove away, Mateo couldn't help but reflect on the lessons he'd learned. The world was full of people who judged others by their appearances, but he had proven that true success came from within. And as he looked out at the horizon, he knew that this was just the beginning of an even greater adventure. As they drove away from the airport, Mateo couldn't help but feel a swell of pride and gratitude. The events of the day had tested him in ways he hadn't expected, but they had also reaffirmed his resolve and reminded him of the strength of his support system. Santiago sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through his phone with the determined focus of a man on a mission. Carlos, seated in the back, had already begun spinning stories of the future adventures they could take on Mateo's new jet. "I'm serious, Mateo," Carlos said, leaning forward between the seats. "We could fly to the coast for the freshest seafood, or maybe visit one of those fancy cities your crops are supplying now. You could meet your international buyers face to face and show them who's behind their premium produce." Mateo chuckled, his hands steady on the steering wheel. "One step at a time, Carlos. Let's get the jet delivered first." But as he said it, a new thought occurred to him. Owning a private jet wasn't just a logistical improvement for his business. It was a chance to rewrite how the world saw farmers like him. Too often, people underestimated the intelligence, innovation, and ambition that farmers brought to the table. Mateo realized he now had a platform to shift that narrative. "Santiago," Mateo said, breaking the comfortable silence in the car, "what would you think about us hosting an event? Something that brings together farmers and business leaders. We could show people the potential of combining hard work on the land with modern technology and global connection." Santiago looked up from his phone, his expression thoughtful. "That's a brilliant idea, Dad. It could be a conference or even a trade fair. You could share your story and inspire others to think big." Carlos clapped his hands together, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. And you could call it something like From Fields to Flight, a celebration of progress and vision. Imagine how many people would love to see a farmer owning a jet and making waves in the business world. Mateo smiled, the idea sparking a fire within him. He had always been focused on his farm and his family, but maybe it was time to expand his influence even further. He wanted to show others that with enough determination and hard work, even the most ambitious dreams were possible. As they reached Mateo's modest farmhouse, the golden light of the sunset bathed the fields in a warm glow. His wife, Rosa, and their youngest daughter, Clara, were waiting on the porch. The sight of his family always brought a sense of peace, grounding him in what mattered most. Rosa's eyes lit up as she saw Mateo step out of the truck, her arms folding across her chest with a knowing smile. "So, did you buy your jet?" she asked teasingly, though her voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. Mateo approached her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I did," he said simply. But it wasn't just about the jet. It was about proving that we belong at the table with anyone else. Clara, her curious eyes wide, ran up to her father. "Papa, are we going to fly in it? Can I sit in the pilot's seat?" Mateo knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "One day, mijija, but for now, let's just enjoy what we've built here." As the family gathered for dinner that evening, Mateo shared the events of the day with Rosa and Clara. Santiago and Carlos chimed in with their own perspectives, the table alive with laughter and animated conversation. Despite the challenges he had faced, Mateo felt a profound sense of gratitude. The humiliation at the airport had been painful, but it had also been a reminder of how far he had come and how much further he could go. Later that night, as the house grew quiet and the family settled in for the evening, Mateo stepped out onto the porch. The cool night air carried the scent of the earth, a comforting reminder of his roots. He looked out at the fields, their neat rows stretching into the darkness, and thought about the journey ahead. The jet would be delivered soon, and with it, a new chapter would begin. But Mateo knew that his story wasn't just about him. It was about every farmer who had ever been underestimated, every dreamer who had been told they weren't good enough, and every person who had ever felt out of place in a world that judged them unfairly. Mateo was determined to use his success not just for his own gain, but to pave the way for others. He pulled out his phone and opened a blank document, his fingers hovering over the keys. After a moment, he began to type, the words coming easily now that he knew what he wanted to say. "To every farmer, dreamer, and underdog, this is just the beginning." Satisfied, Mateo saved the document and slipped his phone back into his pocket. The stars above shone brightly, and for the first time in a long while, Mateo felt as though the universe was smiling back at him. The delivery of Mateo's jet came quicker than expected. A week later, the quiet farm was abuzz with activity as the sleek aircraft arrived at a private airfield nearby. Mateo, dressed in his signature jeans and flannel shirt, stood with his family and a few close friends as the jet gleamed in the afternoon sun. Santiago was by his side, his professionalism evident in his sharp suit, but his pride in his father was unmistakable. The airfield manager, a warm and knowledgeable woman named Elena, stepped forward to greet them. Her approach was different from what Mateo had experienced before. There was no judgment in her eyes, just respect for a man who had clearly earned his success. Rivera, Elena said with a smile, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard about your story, and I have to say, it's inspiring." Mateo shook her hand, his confidence growing. "Thank you, Elena. This is a big step for my family and our business. I'm glad we're working with someone who sees it that way." Aaron kissed her cheek. Elena gestured toward the jet. "Shall we take a look? I've arranged for a pilot to give you a detailed walk." As they moved toward the jet, Clara tugged at Mateo's sleeve, her eyes wide with excitement. "Papa, can I sit in the pilot's seat?" Mateo grinned, lifting her up into his arms. "Of course, mijija. This is as much yours as it is mine." Inside the jet, Mateo was struck by the luxury and practicality of the design. The leather seats, polished wood accents, and state-of-the-art controls were impressive. But what truly mattered to him was the potential it held. This wasn't just a plane, it was a symbol of everything he had worked for. As the pilot explained the features and capabilities of the jet, Mateo listened intently. He wasn't just a passenger, he wanted to understand every detail, every function. His curiosity and determination impressed the pilot, who soon realized that Mateo's background as a farmer had given him a natural aptitude for systems and machinery. "You've got a good head for this," the pilot said with a nod. "I wouldn't be surprised if you decided to learn how to fly it yourself." Mateo chuckled, the idea sparking something in him. "Maybe one day," he said, his tone half joking but filled with possibility. After the walkthrough, Mateo and his family stood outside the jet, taking photos to commemorate the moment. But Mateo's mind was already racing ahead. The idea of hosting an event to bridge the gap between farmers and global business leaders had taken root, and now he had the perfect platform to make it happen. 2 months later, the first ever Fields to Flight conference was held at the same airfield. The event was unlike anything the small town had ever seen. Farmers from all over the region gathered, their boots and overalls a stark contrast to the tailored suits and polished shoes of the international business leaders in attendance. Yet there was no judgment, only curiosity and a shared sense of purpose. Mateo stood at the podium, the jet gleaming behind him as a backdrop. He wore his usual attire, refusing to conform to the expectations of others, but his presence commanded respect. The crowd fell silent as he began to speak. "Look, this is only," Mateo said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today is about more than just agriculture or business. It's about breaking barriers, challenging stereotypes, and proving that success isn't limited to those who fit a certain mold." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "I've been a farmer my whole life. I know what it's like to be underestimated, to have people assume that because you work the land, your dreams must be small. But let me tell you something, the strength, intelligence, and innovation it takes to grow something from the earth are the same qualities it takes to grow a business, a community, or even a global enterprise." The audience erupted into applause, but Mateo wasn't finished. He went on to share his story, how he had saved for years, faced prejudice, and refused to back down. He spoke of the lessons he had learned and the importance of staying true to oneself. By the time he finished, the energy in the room was electric. After the speech, attendees mingled, exchanging ideas and forging connections. Santiago, ever the strategist, was deep in conversation with a group of investors interested in supporting sustainable farming initiatives. Rosa and Clara led a tour of the jet, proudly showcasing the achievement that had once seemed so far out of reach. Carlos, meanwhile, had taken it upon himself to entertain the crowd. "And that's how Mateo taught me to drive a tractor without breaking the fence," he exclaimed, earning a round of laughter from the farmers gathered around him. As the day went on, it became clear that the conference was more than just an event. It was a movement. Farmers who had once felt isolated in their work now saw the possibilities that lay beyond their fields. Business leaders who had dismissed agriculture as old-fashioned realized its potential as the foundation of innovation and sustainability. Toward the end of the day, Elena approached Mateo, her expression thoughtful. "You've started something incredible here," she said. "Have you considered making this an annual event?" Mateo smiled, the idea already forming in his mind. "I think I have," he replied. "This is just the beginning." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Mateo stood by the jet with his family. The fields beyond the airfield stretched out like a patchwork quilt, a reminder of where his journey had begun. Rosa slipped her hand into his, her voice soft. "You've done something amazing, Mateo," she said. "Not just for us, but for so many others." Mateo nodded, his heart full. "It's not just about the jet," he said. "It's about what it represents. Hard work, resilience, and the belief that we're capable of more than anyone expects." As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Mateo looked at his family and friends gathered around him. The road ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. This was a story of not just dreams realized, but barriers broken and legacies built. And Mateo knew with every fiber of his being that the best was yet to come. As the Fields to Flight conference wrapped up and the guests began to depart, Mateo remained at the airfield, his heart still brimming with excitement and pride. The day had been an enormous success, but Mateo knew that success wasn't a finish line, it was a door to greater challenges. As he stood there, watching the jet gleam under the setting sun, a thought struck him. "Why stop here?" Mateo murmured to himself. He turned to Santiago, who was packing up materials from the event. "Son, what do you think about taking this conference on the road?" Santiago looked up, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I mean taking this idea global," Mateo said, his eyes lighting up. "There are farmers like me all over the world, people who are underestimated and undervalued. What if we could connect them with opportunities, technology, and knowledge, no matter where they are? The jet isn't just a tool for business, it's a bridge to the rest of the world." Santiago smiled. "I think it's a brilliant idea, Dad. We could visit agricultural communities in other countries, host workshops, and bring experts to places that need innovation. It wouldn't just be about business, it would be about empowering people." Mateo nodded, the plan taking shape in his mind. "Exactly. And we'll invite leaders from different industries to join us, to see firsthand the potential in these communities." The idea ignited a new wave of excitement within Mateo, and he knew there was no time to waste. Over the following weeks, he worked tirelessly with Santiago, Rosa, and even Carlos to plan the first international tour. They named the initiative Seeds of Change, symbolizing the growth that could come from planting new ideas and opportunities in fertile ground. The first stop was a small farming village in Mexico, where Mateo had grown up before moving to his current farm. As the jet landed on a modest airstrip near the village, Mateo felt a wave of nostalgia and emotion. He hadn't been back in years, and the sight of the familiar fields and hills brought back memories of his childhood, of hard work, dreams, and the determination to build a better life. The villagers had gathered to welcome Mateo and his team, their faces lit with curiosity and excitement. Children ran alongside the jet as it taxied to a stop, their laughter echoing through the air. Mateo stepped out of the jet, his heart swelling with pride as he saw the smiles of his old neighbors and friends. An elderly man stepped forward, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Mateo, is that really you?" he called out. Mateo recognized him immediately. "Don Felipe," he exclaimed, embracing the man warmly. "It's been too long." Don Felipe looked Mateo up and down, his eyes twinkling. "You've done well for yourself, Mateo. A jet, eh? Who would have thought?" Mateo chuckled. "I've been blessed, Don Felipe, but I haven't forgotten where I come from." Over the next few days, Mateo and his team hosted a series of workshops and events in the village. They brought in experts to teach sustainable farming techniques, introduced new technologies to improve efficiency, and connected the farmers with buyers who were willing to pay fair prices for their crops. The villagers were eager to learn, and the atmosphere was one of hope and possibility. One of the most impactful moments came when Mateo shared his own story with the villagers. He stood in front of a group of farmers, many of whom wore the same kind of simple clothes he had worn all his life, and spoke from the heart. "I was once told that I didn't belong in a place like this," Mateo said, gesturing toward the jet parked in the background. "That I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or rich enough. But I proved them wrong. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to show that people like us have just as much right to dream big as anyone else." The farmers listened intently, their expressions a mix of admiration and determination. Mateo's words resonated deeply, and by the end of the session, several of them approached him with their own stories and aspirations. One young farmer, a woman named Anna, stood out. She had a small plot of land where she grew organic vegetables, but she struggled to find buyers willing to pay a fair price. "I want to expand," she told Mateo, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "But every time I try, people tell me it's too risky or that I should stick to what I know. What would you do?" Mateo smiled, seeing a younger version of himself in Anna. "I would take the risk," he said, "but I would also prepare. Learn as much as you can, build connections, and don't be afraid to ask for help. The world is bigger than you think, Anna, and there are people out there who believe in what you're doing." And Anna nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Thank you, Mateo. I won't give up." By the end of the visit, the village was buzzing with new ideas and plans. Mateo and his team left behind not only resources and knowledge, but also a renewed sense of hope. As the jet took off, Mateo looked out the window at the village below, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The Seeds of Change initiative continued to grow, taking Mateo and his team to countries across the globe. In each place they visited, they encountered unique challenges and opportunities, but the mission remained the same: to empower farmers and bridge the gap between tradition and innovation. In India, Mateo met a group of women who had started a cooperative to produce organic spices. Their passion and resilience reminded him of Rosa, and he worked with them to secure international buyers who recognized the value of their work. In Kenya, he visited a community that had struggled with droughts and learned how local farmers were using innovative irrigation systems to transform their fields. Inspired by their ingenuity, Mateo arranged for a partnership with a company that specialized in water conservation technologies. In Brazil, he stood in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, speaking to indigenous farmers about the importance of preserving their land while finding sustainable ways to thrive. The experience humbled him, reminding him of the delicate balance between progress and responsibility. With each stop, Mateo's vision expanded. He began to see himself not just as a farmer or a businessman, but as a bridge builder, a connector of people, ideas, and opportunities. His jet, once a symbol of individual success, had become a tool for collective change. Back at home, Mateo's farm had also transformed. Rosa had taken charge of operations, incorporating many of the techniques and technologies Mateo had encountered on his travels. Clara, inspired by her father's journey, had started her own small garden and proudly showed off her crops to anyone who visited. One evening, as the family sat on the porch, overlooking the fields, Clara turned to her father. "Papa, do you think I could be a pilot one day?" Mateo smiled, pulling her close. "You can be anything you want, mija. The sky's the limit." As the stars began to twinkle above, Mateo reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From a humble farmer facing prejudice at an airport to a global advocate for change, his story was one of perseverance, resilience, and the belief that no dream was too big. And as he looked out at the horizon, Mateo knew that the seeds he had planted, both in the fields and in the hearts of people around the world, would continue to grow, creating a legacy that would last for generations. Before you go, check out the next video on screen for another amazing story, and be sure to subscribe so you'll always catch our latest content right when it drops.